Have you ever compared anyone to sushi from a gas station? If you have, I want to hear all about it. And if you haven't, then you need to stick around for this story. I'm AziPaybarah, host of this podcast and a reporter coming to you from Substack. Brendan Carr, chairman of the Federal Communication Commission, which is a very powerful regulating arm of the Trump administration, he's been saying that more people trust the sushi they can buy at a gas station than they do of news media. He said it last week
fake news
after Stephen Colbert and Paramount had their very big public fight.
On full display. And it's why people have more trust and faith in gas station sushi today than they do in the legacy news media. This was Democrat on Democrat violence. CBS was very clear.
And he said it again at an event hosted by Semaphore, which was titled Distrust of the Media. Semaphore was looking to see how to get answers about rebuilding that trust. Brendan Carr showed up, seeming to want to tear it down even more. And he referenced his quote.
I have this line where I say that more people trust, gas station sushi than sort of traditional media. And people think I was just making that up.
And he said that it wasn't hyperbole, that he wasn't making it up, that there is a fact that underlines this entire thing. A survey, in fact, data.
But no, the data is there. It actually shows that 85% of people, higher percentage of people would buy gas station sushi than have a high amount of trust in the national news media. How do we get here?
85. When you're speaking publicly and you're thinking of one or two or three sentences at the same time and you switch midway? Well, that's what he did. And he sort of stepped away from that 85 number and continued on with his sentence and just said more people would rather buy sushi at a gas station than believe the news that they get from media.
How do we get here? I think it's a couple of factors, like most things that have a confluence. One, though, is I think too much of the national news media is simply drastically out of touch with where the American people are. Washington Post. Going into Super Bowl Sunday, they write an article in the paper that says the most relevant person to the Super Bowl is Colin Kaepernick, someone who has not stepped on a football field in over 10 years.
Can I ask you something about your media diet? Because
I was at that event. I was standing in the back. I might have been looking at my phone, trying to find food nearby. But I heard sushi. I heard trusted media. I didn't find a place to eat, and I went back to scrolling. But when I went back to listen to what Brendan Carr actually said, I got really curious.
85% of people.
Where was that number? Where did that come from? So I started looking. And lo and behold, I found his source. I found where Brendan Carr was getting his information from. No, it wasn't just Twitter, it wasn't X, and it wasn't from some red phone in the Oval Office. He was actually citing a real survey, a real study. Two of them, in fact. But he wasn't quite doing it accurately. In fact, he was missing some very important nuances that actually made what he said incorrect, making him the actual agent that's lowering the trust in media by repeating something that was inaccurate. So the first survey that he was referring to, it's by a company that provides technology services to convenience stores, people and companies that work with them. And the number one food item that people say they do not trust and do not want to buy is sushi from a gas station. Sorry, sushi lovers. I know there's some great ones out there in Dallas, Texas, in Anchorage, Alaska. But for the rest of the country, it's a risky prospect. 85% of people, according to this survey, conducted in April 2025, released in October 2025, 85% of those respondents said they wouldn't buy gas station sushi. It's long held the title as the number one questionable food product to buy at a store like that. So if you have 85% of people saying they wouldn't buy it, you have, at most, 15% that would buy it. I might be in that 15% category. But then, Brendan Carr made reference to another study. This one is from Gallup. We all know what that is. Polling outfit, gold standard of public surveys, been around for ages. Been around longer than you and I, probably. And they've been asking people, adults 18 and over, registered voters often, do you have trust in major institutions like the church, Congress, big banks, small businesses, and yes, media. And they define media as newspapers, television, and radio. They don't really say local. They don't specify or distinguish ABC, NBC, CBS, LMNOP, CNN, or even Fox or MS Now. They just say television. They don't say which radio station, WNYC for my friends in New York, or WBUR in some other cities. They just say radio. And the number was 28%, 2-8. That's because 20% of people said they had somewhat trust in media, and an additional 8% said they had a great deal of trust in media. 20 somewhat, 8 a great deal. Add those two together and what do you get? 28. Remember that number, because that's the number that Gallup put in the headline when they released their findings in October 2025. But you hear Brendan Carr tell it. When he talks about trust in media and he makes the comparison between people who would buy gas station sushi versus trust in media, he's referring to the 15% that would buy gas station sushi, 15, against only the part of the Gallup survey referring to people that had a great deal of trust, 8%, great deal. He's ignoring that other 20% to make the case that media is so untrustworthy, so unliked by the masses that a person like him, a Trump appointee, has to come in like a wrecking ball and shake things up. Except what he is saying is inaccurate. 28 is larger than 15. And amazingly, the reason that Brendan Carr says more people would rather buy that gas station sushi is because the media is inaccurate. They lie, they distort things. That's his argument. And he is the one distorting and making inaccurate statements and blaming other institutions for it.
Well, President Trump has been so far ahead of the curve on so many issues, as you noted, on the economy, on border security, and perhaps nowhere else when he called out the legacy media for being fake news. And yesterday, the American people got to see that on full display. And it's why people have more trust and faith in gas station sushi today than they do in the legacy news media.
You've got the U.S. men's hockey team winning the gold medal for the first time in over 40 years, and you've got ABC reporters and others that are saying they really missed a cultural moment because they went and saw the President of the United States. So I think there's all of these instances where you can see
just to
traditional news media that are simply out of touch. But it's more than that. There's a whole separate bucket of areas where the national news media is just pushing one hoax after the other.
Can I ask you about your personal media diet for a second, though?
Biden being of, sound mind.
This is impressive.
Mostly peaceful protests, Covington Catholic. The list goes on and on and on. And then there's another bucket.
I feel like I'm talking to Twitter here.
There's another bucket.
To X. Sorry.
So many of these journalists that are saying, hey, we're just like straight newsmen giving to you straight. When they eventually get fired or lose their job, they show you who they really are. Part of the way that I think restoring trust is going to work is for journalists to be honest with the American people.
And what's sort of fascinating about what Brendan Carr is doing is that if you go by his standards, if you only look at the ones who have great deals of trust in them, there'd be a lot of institutions that would be in serious trouble. Supreme Court, 10%. The presidency is at 17%. Congress is at 4%. Television news, you're at 5%. Congratulations. Newspapers are at 6%. So even if you go by Brendan Carr's own equation, newspapers are more trustworthy than Congress. 6 is bigger than 4. And it's just sort of remarkable what you can do when you look at numbers the way you want. So what's the takeaway from this? When somebody is sharing a great quote, vivid, catchy, sounds empirical, look it up. Maybe it's true and we all learned something. Maybe it's not true and we still learned something. So that's today's very short episode. Gas station sushi. Lessons about media and regulators. Hopefully this story has made you curious, maybe a little bit hungry. See you next week. And until then, I hope you find something you trust.